The school nurse called me at work and said my daughter had collapsed during class. I told her she had the wrong number. The nurse checked the emergency form again. Is this Jenna Miller? Yes. Then I don't understand. Sophie Reed listed you as her mother. I looked at the framed photograph beside my computer. It showed my husband, Paul, standing with our 11-year-old son, Ethan, during a camping trip. I had one child, son. There had never been a girl named Sophie in our family. My son's name is Ethan, I said. He attends Westbrook Middle School. I don't have a daughter. The nurse became quiet. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. This is Westbrook High School. Sophie is 17. She entered your name, home address, and phone number on her emergency form. A cold feeling moved through my chest. Our address was not listed publicly. How does she know where I live? I was hoping you could explain that. Is she conscious? Yes. She fainted during chemistry class, but her vital signs are stable. Her guardian is on the way. Then call her guardian. We did. But Sophie is asking for you. I should have ended the call. Instead, I left work and drove to the high school. I told myself there had been a clerical mistake. Maybe another. Jenna Miller lived nearby. Maybe Sophie had copied the wrong information from an online directory. But none of those explanations made sense. The nurse had repeated my full address. She had even confirmed my former last name, Carter. Only people who had known me before my marriage called me Jenna Carter. The school nurse's office was near the main entrance. A woman in blue scrubs met me at the door. Her identification badge read Teresa Alvarez. She appeared to be in her mid-50s. Her dark hair was streaked with gray, and there was an expression on her face I could not understand. Mrs. Miller? Yes. I'm Teresa. Sophie is inside. What happened to her? She skipped breakfast and became dehydrated. She fainted, but she didn't suffer a serious injury. Why did she list me as her mother? Teresa looked through the small glass window in the door. You should ask her yourself. Sophie was sitting on a medical cot with a blanket over her legs. She had long, dark brown hair and hazel eyes. When she looked at me, my body reacted before my mind did. I stopped in the doorway. There was something familiar about her face. It was not an exact resemblance. Her nose was narrower than mine and her eyes were lighter. But the way she held her mouth when she was frightened reminded me of photographs taken when I was her age. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. You came. I don't know you, I said. Her expression fell. I know. Why did you tell the school I'm your mother? I didn't say you raised me. That does not answer my question. Sophie reached for the backpack beside the cot. Teresa stopped her and retrieved it. From inside, Sophie removed a sealed plastic bag. It contained a tiny hospital bracelet. The plastic had yellowed with age. The faded writing was still visible. Baby girl Carter. Below the name was a date. September 14th, 17 years earlier. I felt the room tilt. That was the date my first child had been born, and the date I had been told she died. Before I met Paul, I had been engaged to a young man named Daniel Brooks. I became pregnant when I was 21. At 34 weeks, another driver crossed the center line and struck my car. Doctors performed an emergency cesarean section. I woke up almost 2 days later. My mother, Diane, was sitting beside my bed. She told me my daughter had lived for only 19 minutes. There had been no funeral. My mother said the hospital had arranged a private cremation because I was still recovering. For years, I kept a copy of the fetal death certificate in a box I never opened. Daniel disappeared from my life shortly afterward. My mother told me grief had frightened him away. I eventually rebuilt my life. I married Paul. We had Ethan, but I never forgot the daughter I had lost. Now a 17-year-old girl was holding a hospital bracelet bearing my former name and my daughter's birth date. Where did you get that? I asked. My adoptive mother kept it in a safe. Who is your adoptive mother? Karen Reed. Where is she? She died 6 months ago. I sat down because my legs would no longer support me. Sophie watched me carefully. My aunt found the safe after Mom died, she explained. There was a letter inside. It said my adoption might not have been legal. The office door opened. A woman in her 40s entered. She wore a rain-soaked gray coat and carried a thick envelope. Sophie. The girl looked relieved. This is my Aunt Rachel. Rachel Reed had become Sophie's guardian after Karen's death. She apologized for not arriving sooner. Then she looked at me. You must be Jenna. Why did you bring her to this town? Because Sophie wanted to find you. Rachel had accepted a temporary teaching position nearby and enrolled Sophie at Westbrook High School 3 weeks earlier. Sophie had found my current name and work information online. She entered me as a secondary emergency contact without telling Rachel. I wanted to speak to you, Sophie said. But every time I saw your house, I became afraid. You came to my house? Twice. I stayed across the street. My fear was turning into anger. You had no right to involve my family without contacting me first. I know. She's 17, Rachel said. She just lost the only mother she ever knew. And I buried my daughter 17 years ago. Teresa closed the office door. Mrs. Miller, did you give birth at St. Matthew's Hospital? I looked at her. Yes. Was your Dr. Malcolm Vale? A chill moved through me. How do you know that? Teresa sat across from me. Before I became a school nurse, I worked in the maternity department at St. Matthew's. I stared at her. When? For 9 years, including the year Sophie was born. Rachel placed the envelope on the desk. It contained an amended birth certificate listing Karen and Robert Reed as Sophie's parents. There was also an old photograph of me leaving a prenatal appointment. I had never seen it before. On the back, someone had written Jenna Carter, birth mother, age 21. The final document was a copy of an adoption consent form. A signature resembling mine appeared at the bottom. I never signed this. Rachel nodded. Karen became suspicious before she died. She hired someone to examine the paperwork. He believed the signature had been copied from one of your hospital admission forms. Teresa picked up the hospital bracelet. Her hands began shaking. I remember this identification number. You remember a bracelet from 17 years ago? I remember because I filed an incident report about it. She looked at Sophie, then she looked at me. I was in the delivery room the night your daughter was born. I could barely force the words out. Did she die? No. Teresa's answer was immediate. Your daughter was premature, but she was breathing. I heard her cry. The room went completely silent. Teresa placed the bracelet in front of me. Your baby did not die that night, Jenna. She pointed toward Sophie. I believe someone took her. Teresa locked the nurse's office and asked another staff member to cover for her. Then she told us what she remembered. I had arrived at St. Matthew's Hospital unconscious after the car accident. Daniel was working in another state that week and could not be reached immediately. My mother was the only family member present. Dr. Malcolm Vale performed the emergency cesarean section. My baby was born at 11:42 p.m. She weighed 4 pounds and 7 ounces. She cried when Dr. Vale lifted her, Teresa said. Her breathing was weak, but it improved after we gave her oxygen. Then, why was I told she died? I don't know everything that happened, but I know what I saw. The baby was taken to the neonatal intensive care unit. She remained there through the night. The following morning, Teresa noticed that the child's chart had been removed. Dr. Vale told the staff that the baby had been transferred to a private neonatal facility because of a serious heart condition. No ambulance arrived. There was no standard transfer record. Teresa saw a woman from a private adoption agency entering the restricted nursery. Later that afternoon, my mother signed several documents in Dr. Vale's office. What documents? I asked. I couldn't see them. When I asked, Dr. Vale told me they were cremation forms. Teresa had returned for her next shift and discovered that my baby's incubator was empty. The identification entry had been deleted from the department. A nurse supervisor told her the baby had died during transport. Teresa searched the hospital system for a death report. She found nothing. I filed an incident report, she said. 3 days later, the hospital administrator told me the matter had been investigated. He said you had chosen a private adoption and wanted the staff to respect your confidentiality. I was unconscious. I know. Why didn't you contact me? I tried to visit your room, but you had already been discharged. Dr. Vale warned me that contacting you would violate medical privacy. I was 27 years old. He was the head of obstetrics. I was afraid of losing my license. A month later, Teresa's position was eliminated. She believed she had been fired because of the report. She had kept a carbon copy at home. Why didn't you go to the police? I went to an attorney. He said I had no proof a crime occurred. The hospital claimed you signed the adoption papers. I had a husband, a young son, and no money to fight them. She looked at Sophie. I have regretted that decision for 17 years. Rachel suggested that we leave the school before rumors spread. Sophie had recovered enough to go home. I called Paul from the parking lot. He knew about my first pregnancy. Had told him everything before we married, but I could not explain this over the phone. I need you to pick Ethan up, I said. Something happened at the school. Are you hurt? No. But I may not be home for a while. Rachel and Sophie were living in Karen's old childhood home near the edge of town. The house had been empty for years. Inside the living room were several boxes containing Karen's belongings. Sophie placed a framed photograph on the table. It showed Karen and Robert holding her as a newborn. They looked exhausted and happy. I don't want you to think they stole me, Sophie said. They were good parents. I'm not blaming them. My dad died when I was 9. Mom raised me after that. She loved me. I believe you. I'm not looking for someone to replace her. I would never ask you to. That was the first honest conversation we had. Rachel opened the envelope Karen had left. Karen's letter was addressed to Sophie. She explained that she and Robert had tried to adopt for 6 years. A private agency called New Beginnings contacted them about a premature baby whose young mother had supposedly requested a closed adoption. They were told the biological father had surrendered his rights and the mother did not. Want contact, Karen and Robert paid the agency $25,000. They believed the money covered medical and legal expenses. They did not meet me. They never saw an original consent form. Mom didn't know anything was wrong until last year, Sophie said. When Sophie began asking about her medical history, Karen requested the original adoption file. The agency had closed years earlier. A records company sent her several scanned documents. Karen noticed that my signature looked identical on 3 different pages. The angle, spacing, and ink marks were exactly the same. Someone had copied it. She hired a document examiner who agreed. Then Karen hired a private investigator. He found me. She wrote a letter but never mailed it. Her cancer had returned. She feared revealing the truth and dying before she could help Sophie through the consequences. Karen placed everything in the safe and left instructions for Rachel. She was trying to protect me, Sophie said. She also wanted you to know, Rachel replied. I looked at the adoption form again. According to the document, I signed it at 10:15 the morning after the surgery. At that exact time, I had been unconscious and connected to a ventilator. My medical records could prove it, if those records still existed. Rachel arranged a DNA test through an accredited laboratory. Because Sophie was a minor, Rachel gave consent as her legal guardian. Our identification was verified, and the samples were collected under a documented chain of custody. The laboratory said results would take several days, but the bracelet, the date, and Teresa's testimony had already changed what I believed. That evening, I went to my mother's house. Diane Carter was 64. She had raised me alone after my father died when I was 16. For most of my life, I considered her the strongest person I knew. She opened the door and immediately saw the hospital bracelet in my hand. Her face revealed the truth before she spoke. Where did you get that? A girl named Sophie. My mother gripped the doorframe. She found you. Not, who is Sophie? Not, what are you talking about? She found you. I followed my mother into the kitchen. Is she my daughter? Diane sat at the table. Her Hands trembled. I was trying to save you. Answer me. You were 21. Daniel had no money. You had lost your scholarship after missing classes. Your car was destroyed. The hospital bills were enormous. Was my baby alive? My mother began crying. Yes. The word changed everything. I pushed away from the table. For 17 years, I had mourned a child who was alive. I had visited a memorial garden every September. I had blamed myself for driving in the rain. I had believed my body had failed her. That time, my mother knew. Dr. Vale said there was a couple who could give her everything, Diane continued. He said you might not wake up. He said the baby could spend months in intensive care. So you gave her away? He told me you could revoke the adoption after you recovered. I never agreed to an adoption. I signed as a witness. Dr. Vale's attorney handled the rest. Who signed my name? I never asked. You knew it wasn't me. My mother looked down. Yes. The agency paid the hospital expenses. It also gave my mother $15,000 described as a recovery and relocation grant. She used part of it to pay my rent and medical debt. 10 days later, guilt overwhelmed her. She returned to Dr. Vale and demanded that the adoption be reversed. He told her it was too late. He threatened to report her for participating in fraud and said I could also be charged if the adoptive family learned the truth. He said Sophie had already gone home with them, Diane whispered. He said taking her back would destroy 2 families. You let me believe she was dead. I thought grief would eventually end. I thought knowing she was alive somewhere would make you search forever. You took that choice away from me. I was scared. You were not the one who gave birth to her. I asked about Daniel. My mother said he arrived at the hospital 2 days after the accident. She told him the baby had died. She also told him I blamed him for leaving town during the pregnancy. That was a lie. I thought he would convince you to look into the records. Where is he now? My mother's silence frightened me. Daniel had died in a construction accident 9 years after Sophie's birth. I had learned about his death from an old friend. We never spoke again after the hospital. He died believing his daughter had lived for 19 minutes. Before leaving my mother's house, I asked one final question. Did you ever see Sophie after the adoption? My mother walked to a locked cabinet. She removed a photograph. It showed a little girl playing in a park. Sophie appeared to be about 4. You followed her? Only a few times. Dr. Vale gave me the adoptive family's name. I wanted to make sure she was safe. You knew where she was? I knew the town. I did not know their address. You could have told me. I was afraid you would never forgive me. I placed the photograph beside the hospital bracelet. You were right. 4 days later, the DNA results arrived. The probability that I was Sophie's biological mother was greater than 99.99%. Attached to the report was a copy of the questioned adoption consent. The signature was mine. But the hospital's medication chart confirmed that at the time it was signed, I was unconscious. My daughter had not been surrendered. She had been sold. I told Paul everything that night. He read the DNA report twice. Then he sat beside me on the kitchen floor and held my hand. What do you want to do? He asked. I don't know. Then we will figure it out one decision at a time. I was afraid Sophie's existence would damage the family we had built. Paul never treated her like a threat. He reminded me that discovering one child did not reduce our love for another. We explained the situation to Ethan carefully. He stared at me for several seconds. So I have a sister? Yes. Does she know about me? Yes. Can I meet her? His first reaction was not jealousy, it was curiosity. Sophie was more hesitant. She had lost her mother only 6 months earlier. She did not want to enter a stranger's house and pretend we had always been a family. Our first dinner was uncomfortable. Ethan talked too much because he was nervous. Sophie answered politely but kept looking toward the door. Paul did not ask her to call us anything. Before she left, Ethan gave her a photograph from his school science fair. I don't know what brothers are supposed to give their sisters, he said. Sophie smiled for the first time. This is fine. While our families were learning how to speak to one another, Rachel and I hired an attorney named Maya Collins. She specialized in adoption records and medical fraud. Maya immediately sent preservation notices to St. Matthew's Hospital, Dr. Vale and the company storing the New Beginnings files. She also requested my complete medical chart. The hospital initially claimed that records from 17 years earlier had been destroyed. Then Maya produced Karen's copy of the adoption form, because the document carried St. Matthew's identification codes. The hospital was forced to search its archived billing system. It revealed that my daughter spent 21 days in neonatal care. The charges were not billed to me. They were billed to the New Beginnings Adoption Foundation. Sophie had remained in the same hospital for 3 weeks while I was told she was dead. Teresa gave Maya the carbon copy of her incident report. It described the unexplained removal of the identification bracelet and the absence of a transfer record. The report carried a handwritten response from Dr. Vale. Patient chose confidential adoption. No further action required. I had never made that choice. Dr. Malcolm Vale was now 68. He no longer delivered babies, but he served as vice chairman of the hospital board. His name appeared on a new maternity wing. His attorney responded to our questions. He claimed my mother had told the hospital I wanted an adoption. He claimed any irregularity had been an administrative error. Then he suggested that public accusations could result in a defamation lawsuit. Maya was not intimidated. People threaten defamation claims when they want frightened victims to become quiet, she told me. We will rely on documents. The state medical board opened a preliminary investigation. A judge authorized limited access to the archived adoption file. Inside was a financial ledger from New Beginnings. The Reed's payment was divided into several transfers. $10,000 went to St. Matthew's Hospital. $15,000 went to Dr. Vale's private consulting company. $15,000 was listed under my mother's recovery grant. Additional money went to an attorney named Leonard Price. Karen and Robert believed they were paying ordinary adoption and medical fees. They had no knowledge that money had been given to my mother. Then Maya found something worse. My case was not the only one. During the 5 years New Beginnings worked with St. Matthew's, 11 infants had been transferred under unusual circumstances. 4 birth mothers had been heavily sedated when their consent forms were signed. 2 had been told their babies died. Teresa recognized several names. She had questioned those cases as well. Dr. Vale had not made one desperate decision to help my mother. He had been part of a system that targeted frightened families and supplied babies to couples willing to pay large private placement fees. Maya warned us not to discuss the investigation publicly. If records still existed, the authorities needed time to secure them. My mother called every day. I did not answer. Then she left a message saying she had found something belonging to Daniel. I returned to her house with Maya. Diane took us into the attic. Inside an old suitcase were 6 letters. All were addressed to me. All had been written by Daniel during the year after the accident. I had never received them. The first letter began, Jenna, your mother says you never want to see me again. I don't believe those words came from you. In another, Daniel wrote, I keep thinking about our daughter. I wish they had allowed me to hold her. I know you blame me for being away, but I would have returned sooner if I had known. The final letter said, if you truly want me gone, I will stop writing. But I need you to know that losing both of you has broken something in me. My mother had hidden every letter. You stole him from me too, I said. I thought a clean separation would help you recover. You decided what my entire life would become. Diane did not defend herself. She gave Maya a document Dr. Vale had made her sign. It was a confidentiality agreement stating that disclosing the private adoption would expose her to civil liability and criminal investigation. The document had no real legal power, but my mother had believed it. There was also a handwritten note from Dr. Vale. The infant is safe. Do not contact the Reeds again. It proved he knew my mother had attempted to reverse the adoption. Diane agreed to cooperate with investigators. She surrendered her bank records and provided a recorded statement. Her cooperation could not undo what she had done, but it gave authorities direct evidence connecting Dr. Vale to the payment. Sophie asked to hear the truth from Diane herself. We met at Rachel's house. My mother could barely look at her. Sophie placed Karen's photograph on the table. Did you choose them? No, Diane answered. Doctor Vale said he knew a family. How much money did you receive? $15,000. Sophie's face tightened. Was that what I cost? No. That is what the ledger says. The money paid Jenna's medical bills and rent, but taking it was wrong. Everything I did was wrong. Did you ever plan to tell us? Every year. But you didn't. No. Karen spent her last months wondering if she had unknowingly taken someone's baby. She did not take you. I helped someone take you. Sophie remained composed until my mother mentioned the park photograph. Then her voice broke. You watched me grow up? A few times. You could see me, but Jenna couldn't? My mother nodded. Sophie stood. I don't want to see you. Again. Diane accepted her decision. After she left, Sophie went into the bathroom and cried. I wanted to hold her, but I stopped at the door. I was her biological mother. That did not automatically give me the right to touch her when she was hurting. Can I come in? I asked. After a long silence, she opened the door. She allowed me to sit beside her. Neither of us spoke. Several weeks later, Maya received a call from Daniel's parents. They were still alive. Investigators had contacted them while verifying his history. Thomas and Linda Brooks had been told their granddaughter died at birth. When they learned Sophie was alive, they asked to meet her. Sophie agreed. Linda brought a box of Daniel's belongings. Inside was a small stuffed rabbit he had purchased before my accident. He had planned to give it to his daughter. Linda handed it to Sophie. Daniel kept this until he died, she said. He could never throw it away. Sophie held the rabbit against her chest. For the first time, she had something chosen for her by her biological father. Then Thomas gave us Daniel's journal. The final entry about me had been written 7 years after the birth. It contained one sentence. Some part of me still believes Jenna never sent me away. He had been right. The investigation continued for 9 months. Eventually, Dr. Vale was called to give a sworn statement. He denied forging my signature. He blamed the adoption attorney, who was already dead. Then investigators showed him the financial ledger and my mother's confidentiality agreement. He asked for a break. When the interview resumed, he refused to answer further questions. 2 days later, someone attempted to remove archived New Beginnings files from a hospital storage facility. Security cameras recorded Dr. Vale's former assistant entering the building with his access authorization. The files were recovered before they could be destroyed. Inside were the original records of 11 questionable adoptions, and a list of 16 additional children whose birth mothers might also have been deceived. Sophie looked at the list. This was never only about me. No, I said, but it started with the nurse calling you. I thought about Teresa. 17 years earlier, she had been frightened into silence. This time, she was ready to testify. The investigation did not produce a perfect ending. Real consequences took time. Some records were missing. Some witnesses had died. Several legal deadlines had passed. But the surviving documents proved enough. Dr. Vale's medical license was revoked. He was removed from the hospital board. Prosecutors charged him in connection with falsified records, financial fraud, and the later attempt to interfere with archived evidence. The case was still moving through court when Sophie graduated from high school. The hospital issued a public apology to the affected families and created a fund to help them obtain DNA testing and legal support. An independent review identified 7 birth mothers who had likely been deceived. 3 were reunited with their adult children. Others were not ready. Every family had the right to decide what healing meant for them, Teresa testified before the medical board. She admitted that she wished she had fought harder 17 years earlier. The board's report stated that hospital leadership had deliberately ignored her warning. Westbrook High School honored her for helping expose the truth. But Teresa told me she did not feel heroic. I made one phone call, she said. You made the call no one else made. Sophie continued living with Rachel until she turned 18. We did not challenge the adoption or try to erase Karen and Robert from her history. They were her parents. Their names remained on her birth certificate. My name was added to her personal, medical, and family records as her biological mother. Our relationship developed slowly. Some weeks, Sophie visited us twice. Other weeks, she needed distance. She became close to Ethan more quickly than she became close to me. He did not carry the emotional weight the adults brought into every conversation. They argued about movies and shared music. He complained when she borrowed his headphones. She helped him with homework. Their relationship became ordinary. That was exactly what both of them needed. Paul never tried to act like Sophie's father. He told her she could define his place in her life, eventually. She began calling him her stepdad when explaining our family to other people. Daniel's parents became part of her life, too. Linda showed her childhood photographs of Daniel. Thomas taught her how to repair the old bicycle Daniel had ridden as a teenager. Sophie learned that she had Daniel's habit of tapping her fingers when nervous. She also had his love of astronomy. There were pieces of herself scattered across several families. Finding one did not require rejecting another. My relationship with Diane was more difficult. She pleaded guilty to a lesser charge connected to the fraudulent documents and agreed to testify against Dr. Vale. Because she had cooperated and because so much time had passed, she did not receive a prison sentence. She was ordered to complete community service and pay restitution. But the legal penalty was not the consequence that mattered most to her. Sophie refused contact. I spoke to my mother only through our therapist for several months. She apologized repeatedly. I told her an apology could acknowledge harm, but it could not demand forgiveness. You did not make one bad decision, I said. You continued making it for 17 years. I know. You watched Sophie in that park and came home without telling me. I was ashamed. You protected yourself. Yes. That was the first time she answered without offering an excuse. Diane began writing letters to Sophie. She gave them to Rachel without asking that they be delivered. She said Sophie could read them someday, destroy them or ignore them. A year after the school nurse's call, Sophie decided to read the first one. She did not respond, but she kept it. That was not forgiveness. It was only the possibility that forgiveness might someday exist. Karen's role also deserved to be remembered. Before she died, she had created a video for Sophie. Rachel found it on an old laptop. In the recording, Karen looked weak from cancer treatment. She spoke directly to the camera. Sophie, if you are watching this, you have probably found the documents. Your father and I believed your adoption was legal. We believed your birth mother had chosen us. Karen paused several times to breathe. If she did not choose this, then she deserves the truth. And so do you. She told Sophie that searching for her biological family would never be a betrayal. Love is not a room with only one chair, she said. You do not have to remove me to make space for someone else. Sophie asked me to watch the video with her. When it ended, we both cried. I wish I could thank her, I said. She knew, Sophie replied. That's why she left the file. On the anniversary of Karen's death, we visited her grave. Stood several feet away while Sophie and Rachel placed flowers. Before leaving, Sophie introduced me. Mom, this is Jenna. It was the first time she had called Karen Mom in front of me. I did not feel jealous. I felt grateful. Karen had loved my daughter during every year I was denied the chance. At Sophie's graduation, our complicated family occupied almost an entire row. Rachel sat on one side of me. Paul and Ethan sat on the other. Daniel's parents were beside them. Diane watched the ceremony through a private live stream because Sophie was not ready for her to attend. Teresa sat near the aisle. When Sophie's name was announced, all of us stood. After the ceremony, Sophie handed me an envelope. Inside was a copy of the emergency contact form she had completed the year before. My name appeared beneath the word mother. "I'm sorry I listed you without asking," she said. "If you hadn't, Teresa might never have called." "I didn't know if you would come." "Neither did I." Sophie looked at me. "But you did." She removed a new form from the envelope. It was for the university she planned to attend in the fall. Under emergency contacts, she had written 3 names. Rachel Reed. Relationship, aunt and guardian, Jenna Miller. Relationship, mother, Paul Miller. Relationship, stepfather. She handed me a pen. "I need your signature." My hand shook as I signed. 17 years earlier, someone had copied my signature onto a document that took my daughter away. Now Sophie was asking me to sign a document that recognized our relationship. That evening, we gathered at our house. Ethan complained that Sophie would be attending college too far away. Paul cooked too much food. Daniel's parents brought the stuffed rabbit. Rachel brought Karen's video. There was still sadness in the room. There always would be. Sophie had lost the mother who raised her. Daniel died without learning his daughter survived. I lost 17 years I could never recover. No court ruling could return them. But the future was no longer being controlled by the people who had stolen our past. Before Sophie left, she stopped beside the framed family photograph in our hallway. It had once shown only Paul, Ethan, and me. We had taken a new photograph after graduation. Rachel stood beside Sophie. Daniel's parents stood behind her. Paul and Ethan were on my right. Sophie was on my left. No one had been removed from the family to make room for someone new. The school nurse had called me about a daughter I did not have. At least, that was what I believed when I answered the phone. But Teresa had not called the wrong number. Sophie had not chosen the wrong emergency contact. I had always had a daughter. I simply had not known she was alive.